Duncan, welcome to Talent Matters, our podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks Dave. Yeah, glad
right?
to be here.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure to everyone watching, we had lunch before this and we had a beer before this as well. So
It was very nice.
It was nice, yeah. It was good. So don't know what it's going to do for the quality of the podcast, but we only had one, so it was only one beer. So Duncan, IRG Law.
IRG Law, yes.
What do they do? What do you do?
Yeah, so we're a small boutique niche recruitment company. We specialise in legal recruitment, so focus on the London legal market, London law practices, nothing in-house. So within that, we focus primarily on property-based law recruitment, so solicitors that will deal with residential, commercial property, construction, property disputes.
Yeah.
A lot of the firms that we work with are multidisciplinary, so we also help out on things like family law, private client matters, anything that can really help our clients with their services.
So it's not just kind of legal recruitment; it's specific legal
Very
recruitment.
niche. Yeah. So being a small business, and one of the reasons we chose legal as an area to focus on, niche is so important. I've been in companies before where you try and over-cater, and it is almost like you're trying to be a jack of all and master of none.
Yeah.
So for us to be able to sort of identify a market, be able to understand that market in depth, map it out effectively in terms of who are the key clients, who are the key decision makers, the candidates in that market, it made sense for us to sort of focus on that and become experts in that field.
So what, you haven't always done legal recruitment.
No, we haven't.
It'd be interesting to find out what you did before. Yes. And then how you ended up choosing the specific legal market that you're working in. Yeah, now.
Absolutely. This is so common for a lot of people I speak to in recruitment. You sort of fall into things and you find something that works. And you
I think most people fell into recruitment.
They have,
yeah. I don't know anyone that I mean, maybe you have, that you meet someone that you go, I chose recruitment.
Yeah.
Everyone says, well, I needed some money, or I fell into it. Yeah. I thought it would be good.
I actually didn't even know recruitment was an industry back in the day. So my original career was mainly in purchasing and marketing, which involved a bit of sales. And I worked for an international company called Honeywell. At the time, that company was basically relocating all of their staff back to mainland Europe. So I had a choice to either relocate and go to their main head office, which I didn't really fancy doing with friends, family and everything as a young man.
Yeah. You're still a young man.
Thanks a lot. I am. So I had a decision to make. So I was just researching lots of different industries, and in fact a good friend of mine worked in HR at the time, and she said, I think you should look at recruitment. I think you'd be quite good at it. So I really didn't have much idea what that was about. So this was probably pre-LinkedIn days. Jobs were more kind of like in newspapers and things like that. No one was advertising for recruitment jobs, so I basically got the yellow pages out and looked at all the recruitment companies in Reading and contacted them with my CV.
Yeah.
Just started having conversations. I was lucky enough to find a very small company at the time who were growing. I was about third person in, and they were focusing on IT recruitment. Again, apart from using a keyboard, I had no idea what IT was.
Yeah.
So over the course of probably 15 years working for that firm.
What year? What's the year?
So that would have been about 2000 and probably 2-3, something like that, maybe a bit later.
Yeah.
So it was an absolute education piece. First of all, to understand IT, I was given a specific niche in that sort of job at the time. Even to understand what that did was like mind-blowing. I had no idea what it was.
Bit of a heyday around that time, wasn't it? That was
it was a big boom of IT, I think. Particularly, there was so much, I guess, companies going through transformation, implementing e-commerce systems, websites, anything from CRM systems, back office systems, you name it. Modernisation was key. So yes, it was pretty boom. And it was very sales orientated. I didn't realise that at the time, but you had to sort of understand your market, understand your clients, understand your candidates to kind of succeed in that space. So I was very successful doing that for probably best part of 15 years with the company. And for one reason or another, there's a lot of changes in that firm. They had relocated from Reading to London, which is fine. I did that for a couple of years. But it got too much, 2 hours commuting each way, trying to do 10, 12-hour days. Yeah. And it just got to a point where I thought I could do this myself. So I set up with an ex-colleague at the time.
That was IT at that point?
That was pure IT, and that was a year before lockdown.
Yeah.
So we were going great guns. Yeah. We had won a lot of new business. We were getting new clients on. We were maxed out. We were making good revenue. We had hired our first person who was due to start in April. March came, lockdown happened, and the wheels stopped moving in terms of any new business. Half our client base went. Yeah. We were very lucky in that we had a really strong base of contractors that we ended up having for about 2 or 3 years, which helped us to maintain our business. And at that time, in IT, it was dead. People were being laid off, companies weren't investing, people didn't know what lockdown meant. Unless you're in with some e-commerce or delivery companies simply weren't investing. So we still maintained a good client base during that time. Our growth pretty much stopped, but we said to ourselves, well, as long as we get through this in a better shape than we've entered it, we'll see that as a win, which we did.
So how many? There was 2 of you at that point.
So we'd hired our first member of staff, who's still with me today. Yeah. We had also hired 3 people overseas, so we have some overseas resource that do a lot of our sort of administrative function, a lot of mapping work for us. And during that time, funnily enough, my ex-business partner had a friend who had their own property conveyancing business, and at the tail end of lockdown, the housing market was moving again, and they needed people fairly quickly. Yeah. So they asked if we could help. Again, we didn't really know at that point much about that industry, so we thought, well, we'll research it, we'll look at it. And we were quite successful helping that one firm, and then we got a referral, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yes, yeah.
So over the I suppose 2 years post-lockdown, we'd grown to about 5 UK staff, 5 people in the Philippines, and we recognised that we wanted to build this niche out. IT was, we had some very good clients still, but it's very slow to react post-lockdown, and we're starting to understand the legal market a lot more, and we felt rather than spread ourselves too thin, we needed to focus on one area. Yeah.
And what's the comparisons between the IT? So you don't do any IT now?
No, I turn it away. I still have people come, and
So what's the differences then between the IT market and the legal market?
Yeah. So as a small aspiring business, we still want to grow and have aspirations to do that. Being able to map out and market a niche within the legal sector was a lot easier. Still very, very hard work, but a lot easier to do than IT, because IT is so dynamic, it changes all the time. So for example, a lot of our client base at the time were relatively small. I could cover 7 or 8 different vacancies per company for that one client. You had another client that would have similar vacancies but not the same, so you couldn't double up your candidates to different companies. So it became increasingly more difficult to manage a small pool of clients and try to expand. So we had a decision at that point is, do we niche in IT, which we could have done, but the problem is you go to Wave and say, Wave, I need a developer. Great, well, we don't do development, we do project management. Okay, I don't need a project manager. Yeah. I'll go to somewhere else. Yeah. Oh, you do project management? I need this, this, and this. You can't do it? Okay, I'm going to go to someone who can service everything that I need. Yeah. So, of course, there'd be some environments where you speak to the head of project management or the project's director, and you could do a niche within a firm, but they don't like dealing with 20, 30 different agencies for niches, even though you could do a good job. Yeah. Within legal, it's very different, because unlike technology, if you take a developer, for instance, their skill set and types of tech they use changes so quickly that you can't constantly keep on top of that. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, back in the day of jobs boards, it was quite easy. You'd get your CVs, everyone had to apply through there unless it was word of mouth. Like most industries these days, no one really uses a CV these days until they have to deal with an agency or client direct. They're approached on LinkedIn. But a developer, for instance, wouldn't necessarily put exactly their skill set on their profile. But if we were to map somebody on LinkedIn versus what we can find out through other sources on the legal sector, we can really accurately understand what that person does, and then we're more controlled to be able to map and code our CRM systems to effectively segment very accurately a pool of applicants that meet exactly the requirement that we're hiring for. And to try to do that in IT, it evolves so quick, you can't get the quality of information that you can from the legal sector when it comes to people in IT. Yeah. So ultimately, we were always behind the curve, and in our new industry of legal, I feel we're ahead of the curve.
It's interesting with IT, like, you know, when we've hired, you know, within IT, and like IT itself is so broad, isn't
Massive,
it? You know, but when you're looking at developers, for example, and the sorts of languages you want them to know, sometimes also a lot of developers will list 25 coding languages that they can
everything they've ever touched,
and you've no idea what the proficiency level is on all of those 20. Like, can't possibly be an expert in all of them. But then it also helps from a, you know, searching point of view that language comes up. So I guess you probably don't get that within the legal market, because there's not. I'm sure there's lots of skill sets.
Yeah.
You're not going to have 20 different.
No, there are plenty of variables, but that's where our sort of expertise comes in. So, for example, if we talk about commercial property as a good example, somebody might instruct a law firm to look after their lease renewal, a dispute between the landlord and the tenant in terms of maybe maintenance or breach of contract in some aspects. They might have a transaction, so the transaction could be an outright transaction or leasehold. It might be a corporate transaction where the company's buying the business that owns the property. So there's lots of different variables within that itself. If you've got somebody working for a local high street firm, they might have done some of this stuff, but on a very low level. A small retail unit. You go up to top law firms, we're talking shopping centre level.
Yes, yeah.
So the variety in terms of what they do. So we've developed a system that works very well for us, that means that when we get particular firms that we're working with after a particular type of solicitor with experience of whatever it is that they need, we can segment that out and know that whoever we're presenting for that role has got the experience that's required by that firm.
You've talked you mentioned a couple of times about mapping out the market, mapping things out. What does that mean? What does that mean? You know, what's that in kind of lay terms?
So mapping out for us is being able to identify exactly every company that is in our niche within our London geography that will provide services within, for example, residential conveyancing or commercial conveyancing or some of the other subsidiary functions that I've mentioned. And then within that, understand who are the decision makers, so the partners of the firms that are essentially company directors that will be responsible for their own client base, and the team of solicitors and support staff that are delivering their legal matters for their clients. And then on the flip side is the candidate side, so it's mapping those out. You know, who are the candidates in that market, who do they work for, and the other, I won't go into the details about the tagging side of things, because that's like our competitive advantage in many respects, because it helps us to know that we can target the right applicants with the right message about a particular job, rather than just going, we're covering everybody with the same
email
criteria
everyone else gets.
And you know, and this is one of the early mistakes that we made in the firm, is not recognising that, and quickly put that into correct perspective, so that outreach is valuable, right? You know, you get a certain amount of credits on LinkedIn, for instance. You want to make sure your message is on point, so you can build credibility with your recipient of whatever you're marketing out, whether that's to a client or to a candidate. So, for example, if we were sending somebody who worked for a very small regional law firm to a top international law firm, they'd laugh you out the door, because you know, their starting salaries are probably 4 times what this person's earning, and they would never have touched anything on the level that they've done. So we had to quickly identify how to separate and identify what our audience is, and therefore be able to use that to segment our audiences when marketing.
And I guess the fact that it's now, I asked a bit earlier about the difference between the IT market and the legal market, and I guess what you've described is from an IT perspective is lots of skills, lots of evolving languages and things, huge market in both areas. So you could almost, I don't want to say get away with, but some companies get away with their in-mail and their outreach to clients and candidates that's very generic.
Yes.
But they do enough of it and they'll get a response.
Something will stick. Yeah.
But it doesn't really have any sort of real, it doesn't really buy much credibility, if you like. But it's a volume game.
Yeah.
From what you're saying, and maybe to try and segment the market within IT would be a hugely difficult job to do because everything's changing all the time. Whereas within the legal department, if you work to the legal sector, if you were to try and take that approach, like you said, you send the wrong candidate to the wrong a client that you're working with, and you get it wrong. You said you laughed out the door, and then your reputation's then tarnished a little bit more.
Yeah. So my view on that, and you're right, because I've seen mistakes where that sort of mass mail out approach, works for some verticals or some niches. If you're doing sales job or admin jobs, it doesn't matter too much, because if you're an admin person, you're an admin person, really. And if it's a lot more transferable. But in some respects, I think we've taken the approach that less is more. So we'd rather market to fewer, but with an on-point message that we know hits home.
Yeah.
So whether they're ready to, take you up on responding and that's of interest, we actually get a lot of people, both clients and candidates, come back to us 3-6 months after the event. Client, for example, saying, "Oh, look, we kept holding your details. You sent us some really interesting emails and example CVs, whatever." And we've got a vacancy now, but I kept hold of your stuff because actually I get quite a lot of rubbish through.
Yeah.
Same with candidates. They're like, you sent me some really, really interesting stuff over the last 6 months or something. I'm now looking to go to market. Can we work with you? And particularly on a candidate basis, we find that really helps us to engage more of not a contractual exclusive arrangement, but they trust based on many factors.
Yeah.
In terms of our credibility and our knowledge of the market and helping them to understand what their options are, that they're happy for us to go out and be their person to represent them.
That's it, isn't it? It's the idea that you become their you become their kind of trusted advisors, maybe a bit strong.
It's very much like that,
though. They will listen to you rather than just see you as the vehicle to getting them the job that they want, and they'll drop you as quick as they. And probably works both ways as well, from a candidate and from a client perspective.
Yes,
the quality.
Yeah, it can do. We'll talk about, I guess, the values later on, but that sort of trust component is so important, because these aren't just one-off situations that you're going to deal with somebody. You'd hope that you'd cross paths with them as they progress their career as a candidate.
Yeah.
You hope with a client that they have future hires either within their team, or if they move companies to another team and they get a bigger remit. Ideal scenarios is we're hiring people at decision making level, and then they say, "Well, I've experienced what you do, and I want you to bring candidates in to have that same experience, because I know you're doing things properly."
Yeah. Have you had? Do you get much of that? I mean, this is.
Yeah.
That's the dream, right? That you've got a candidate that then loves you that much because you help them get the dream job. That they then kind of come to you and they know what you're about, versus all the other approaches that they get.
We do get referrals. There are times where we don't get the person a job. They might decide to stay put. They might start having conversations with their current bosses, and the bosses, offer them something better, and they stay put. But they will still, I might get something 3 months later saying, "Oh, so and so has recommended I get in touch. They had a great experience with you."
Yeah.
So, what we what we want to do is just leave that feeling that they are getting very good advice from us. The options that we're presenting them are relevant for them, and we understand what it is that they do and what they want to get out of a career, because we do often get people come to market with really unrealistic expectations. So, for example, an extreme end of that spectrum might be, using the same example earlier, somebody's working in a small regional business or a small high street firm. Their dream is to work for a top international law firm. Those guys won't look at them because they haven't had the training, they haven't worked on such complex or large matters, but in their mind, that's their dream role.
Yeah.
And they won't look at anything unless it's that.
Yeah,
So you've almost got to sort of break it down to them and say, look, we can help you do this, but what you've got to think about is, if that's your plan A, what's your plan B?
Yeah.
Because there's so many candidates we've worked with that will hold out for the dream job.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, and they're still in the same job many years later, and they've probably missed the boat of their time to move, because sometimes there's optimum times to move from somebody's career in a particular level law firm. So once they start understanding that and do a bit more research, maybe they go off and try some other agents. Doesn't work out, they come back and say, okay, I'm ready to listen now.
So this is all brand, isn't it? It's all brand. And
yeah, essentially, it's your individual brand, isn't it? And
do you think there's enough of that in recruitment? The whole idea of trying to make sure that candidates or clients, you're leaving a good impression, so that the footprint that you leave behind kind of comes back to you? Or do you think sometimes we can get all drawn into a situation where we need to recruit today, and so we need to forego tomorrow, especially in bigger firms where people have got targets that they've got to make a number of placements per month and things like that.
There's a lot of short-termism, and people so fixated on just trying to fill vacancies because they're under pressure to hit those targets, and probably deep down they know that they're probably shoehorning somebody into a role that actually isn't right for them, or they're making a placement with a firm that they know has high staff turnover, but they're under pressure to fill the vacancy, and it comes back to sort of bite them a little bit. So I've never been a fan of specific KPI targets. I probably base it on my own life goals and objectives that I want to achieve, and what do I need to do to try and meet those objectives, and I kind of work back in my own mind, I suppose, as to what I need to do to achieve that. So brand is important. I think your personal brand, obviously, when you're dealing with companies, or contacts at those companies, should I say, and the sort of candidates that you work with. I mean, going back to the sort of IT thing, I still get companies that I dealt with 5-10 years ago, candidates that I'd placed come back to market and say, look, I'm back, can we work together again? I see you've moved industry, but do you have any connections in IT still that, maybe I can, you can refer me to, or anything like this? And I'd like to, just because I feel a sort of personal connection to people that I've worked with in the past, but you've got to be a bit brutal sometimes and say, well, I can't deviate from what it is I'm trying to build and achieve.
So, is it the world that you've kind of built, or the business that you've built, is very much around relationship-driven recruitment, by the sounds of it?
Yes, absolutely. I think anything business-wise, people buy from people ultimately, don't they? So, as long as the rest of the things aren't, off point, your contracts or whatever else, of course, people gravitate back to people that they want to sort of build business with. So, yes, ultimately it is that, and I think going back to that sort of less is more thing. There's so many outreach tools out there as an example that one to many, but it is, you're trying to do one message caters all. I'm very much, we've got to find a way of understanding who your target audience is, and come out with content that resonates with them, that you can get that initial engagement. And if I know that bit's right, and I get them interested in that initial outreach, and I suppose it stems back from my IT days of you've got to understand a business to understand the IT systems, to understand the people that are designing, delivering and supporting those IT systems, to see how it all clicks together.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same in any sales scenario. You've got to understand who you're selling to and the products you're selling. And if you can't do that, you're going to find it more hit and miss than hit.
I suppose things will then pass you by, won't they? And you know, key decisions that get made that you didn't know about, you know, can derail your plans if you're not actually knowing what's going on.
So that's why, again, it sort of feeds into that kind of niche thing. Is if you can be more an expert in a field and do well in that field, it's better than trying to sort of spread yourself too thin. And that's where sometimes credibility is difficult to build, because if you're trying to make sense of something that you're not doing all the time, you might talk a good game in certain areas, but you'll be found out because you're up against people that might be experts. And
you've kind of talked a lot. You mentioned about values earlier, and I think values in a business is really interesting, because you can get the words, but you actually have to kind of live those words of the, you know, whatever the values are. And you know, for a while everyone had, you know, dynamic as a value, and you know, integrity and honesty, and all these different words, but they then proceeded to do everything that went against what those values are. I think from the conversation we're having, it's clear, you know, that you're, you know, without even, I mean, you can talk about your values, but I think I already know the values of your business based on the way in which you're saying this is what we do and this is how we work. But you know, do you want to talk a little bit about any values that underpin the business?
Yeah, you know, transparency, honesty, integrity. In my opinion, they all go hand in hand, and those things are slow to build and easy to break. Yeah. So I think anyone who's worked in sales or recruitment has seen bad ways that things are done. Do anything to get a deal over the line, lie, whatever, to candidates, to clients, whatever, and it only comes back to
always comes back, doesn't it?
So there's no point doing it.
Yeah.
So if you can build that trust through, and that's why I think the niche is quite important, through being very knowledgeable about your area that you're operating in, you automatically get trust from somebody, because you're not somebody who doesn't understand the subject matter within reason. I'm obviously not a lawyer, but I've lost count of the times over the years that somebody say to me, "Okay, were you a programmer once, or are you a project manager?" Or because I knew what it was and I understood, and I sat in tons of interviews over time to understand. And if I didn't know something, I'd ask and I'd figure it out. So again, if you can, you're building blocks of that sort of initial contact and that initial outreach, and if you can get on a level with them that they know that you've got a degree of understanding about what they do, and you can talk to them reasonably about their own career experiences and what they want to do in their career, and resonate with that, and be open and honest. I mean, I'll be very open with candidates to explain to them that actually the salary you're looking for and the type of firm that you want to get into is going to be like the needle in the haystack thing. Yes, you can by all means aim to go for it, but I think unfortunately what will happen is you may not get the interview that you're hoping for because of this reason. Now, there's no reason why you can't end up working for that type of firm, but to plot that path, you might want to think about, rather than trying to go directly to that level of law firm, maybe look at going to a boutique firm that specialises in that sort of area, that develops your experience, gets you working on bigger deals, and that law firm might be working on the other side of the matter to that law firm. So then you build your reputation with them at the moment, but because you've got no direct line to doing them, they won't even know who you are, and they won't care. We had a scenario the other day where a client fed back after an interview and said, you know, we've rejected a candidate because they don't have experience of working in volume conveyancing. Our fees are generally low, we do a lot of it, that's how we make our money. This person was probably working on high value properties and it was lower volume. They would struggle in this environment. So we said, okay, the next person we've got come in is very similar to that person. I don't think they'll pass the interview. I think we should maybe, like, it's your call, but I think we should take that person out of the process, because I think you'll find the same. And they respected us for doing that. They said, well, we'll still go ahead with it because we don't want to let that candidate down last minute.
Yeah.
Invariably, the feedback was the same.
Yeah.
But because we've offered that, rather than gone, just see them anyway, they've then gone, okay, so he's on board with us, he's working with us.
Yeah. So
little things like that, for example, they recognise that you're there to support them, not just to try and get a fee.
Yeah, yeah, I can, because the one of the actions to that would be then to go and prep the other candidate and say, right, do some, make sure you answer it like this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But knowing that eventually
they'll get found out,
that it will come unstuck.
Yeah.
What's happening in? I don't know much about the legal market at all. Even within in its broader level.
Yeah.
Other than that, there must be a challenge around candidate numbers, right?
Yep.
I do know that legal training takes a long time.
Yep.
Law degrees, things like that. It's a lengthy old process. So do you struggle? One, what's going on in the market? Is that a problem?
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's what we'd call a candidate-driven market. There's always seemingly fewer candidates than there are jobs available. So there's always people exiting the market. So if we're looking at the London market, you might find people relocating out of London, particularly post-lockdown, when they realise actually I can get a good job in a regional firm, or move back to wherever they moved from London to.
Yeah.
You get people moving in-house, to in-house legal roles, people moving abroad, people falling out of love with the industry, retiring early, whatever.
Stress as well. I mean, it's quite a stressful job.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, so there's some people will choose to just have a complete vocation change.
Yeah.
So there's always a perceived shortage of applicants, whether there is or not. Discuss. The jobs get filled eventually.
Yeah.
There's always a challenge to finding good applicants, and I think that's why when we decided on a niche, that whole mapping side of things was really important to how we could improve our ability to reach out to a bigger audience. So I'll give you an example of that, for instance. So there's plenty of tools that sit in and around LinkedIn where you can look to segment even some of their own inbuilt searches, but it's only as good as the quality of the content that's on somebody's profile. And often it's very limited. So it might say somebody works for law firm X as a lawyer, doesn't tell you what area of law they work in.
Mm-hmm.
So to rely on LinkedIn on its own, you would either do a very broad segmentation and you'd be outreaching to people that were getting a message that was just totally irrelevant to them. They might work for a target law firm that you want to try and take staff from for your client over here, but if you don't know what they do and you're sending them a message and it's, they might be a litigation lawyer and you're sending them something about commercial property transactions and things, it's sort of pointless. And because again you've got limited time and resources to outreach, we wanted a higher percentage of messages hitting home.
And you're probably going to get a fairly snotty message back if you're
at all.
If anything.
Worst scenario is nobody responds and you keep repeating the same.
Yeah.
It's actually nice when somebody comes back and says, actually I'm X.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. You're no longer part of our pool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's actually okay. So that is one of the challenges. The other challenge is, you got to understand your law space, your law firm. So I mentioned earlier about different law firms of different levels. So if you've used lawyers yourself, you'll know that there's an hourly fee depending on whether you get a junior, an associate, a senior or partner level, depending on what level of expertise that you have. Bottom of the rung, you got your high streets, probably if you're, selling a bog standard house might charge you £1,000 to sell your home. If you're in London and you've got a property worth 50, 60 million quid, if you're that lucky, you'd probably be spending £70,000, £80,000 to sell your home.
Just like your house.
Yeah, I wish. So that person doing a basic residential transaction there to there is different. So in terms of what we've had to do, I go back to that sort of mapping and making sure that we can do that. So look, we've done that. We've got various tools that we use to help with being able to outreach, but ultimately there's a large, in my opinion, manual element to what we need to do, both from personalised messaging rather than one message hits all, in terms of mapping to a system that works well for us in terms of our segmentation. There's loads of talk about AI just in the industry generally. I think, last 3 or 4 years, law firms have been looking at it to say, well, we can get AI to replace what lawyers do, because ultimately they're creating contracts or case files or something which is basically taking something that's already been done in the past and customising it to the needs of that customer.
Yeah.
So there is this talk that the junior position within a law firm could be replaced by AI.
Do you think that's likely?
In very large law firms, potentially. I mean, if you look at some of the big US law firms, whilst somebody might take 4 years on their law degree and 3 years training, the starting salary for some of these lawyers first year in the job is up to about 180 grand in some of those US law firms, versus 40k in a normal law firm in London, for example. So that's a massive cost. But if you're taking that away from the junior staff, how do they learn their trade? They've got to be at a point where they're then...
How do you go up to the next?
Yeah. So I think it might overtake a certain amount of it, but it'll only be probably in very large law firms that want to invest in that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of... they're not going to just trust it. They still have people have to review the content that's created.
Someone's got to oversee that. Someone's got to sign that off.
Yeah, but it must be quite time consuming to draft a lot of these proposals or whatever. So maybe a proofreader of some description.
Yeah.
You might have more of that type of role. And then in recruitment, AI, the same. You've got, and you've probably had this from other people in different sectors, you've got various tools out there that are seemingly taking over a lot of early stage recruitment selection criteria. So you might have tools that can assess CVs to look for certain phrases or content that goes, well, this person does X, therefore they're selected for the next stage. And then they might have an automated online assessment, they might have an automated follow-up messaging as a first interview, which is AI, and they go, right, okay, we've sifted the numbers, here's the top 20 that have met that criteria, and from that, so then you've only got one stage of human interaction for interview, potentially.
And do you think that can work? Because you get a lot of feedback from candidates that, being very clear, they don't want to deal with, the AI.
I can't really vouch for the consumer experience side of things, having not really used recruitment agencies myself. But I think AI is only as good as the content that's available for it to assess. So we've all seen good quality and poor quality CVs. Okay, that's potentially a measure of some candidates' credibility in terms of how they present themselves to interview. Doesn't necessarily determine whether they're good at their job or not, unless you're writing CVs or specific
unless it's a CV
documents.
writer's job.
For that side of things. So I think if you've got an environment where it's the masses, so big call centres, big sales, big admin, Amazon warehouse, whatever, I think it's quite easy to do, because they might not necessarily need to look at a CV, but they'd probably want some sort of automated process that can take people down that recruitment process and filter out based on whatever answers they're giving off this AI and present a short list, and that would speed up larger firms' capability to deal with masses. I think in law firms, I think it's unlikely, because you're not dealing with volume applicants. Top law firms will deal with volume, but everyone wants, not everyone, that's a generalisation, but a large percentage of law graduates would want to go and work for a top law firm, but they might not recognise that they've got a degree from the not the right university, that they haven't done internships throughout their studies or whatever it takes to be able to get their foot in the door with those top law firms. So they will be inundated by lots of irrelevant applications, particularly at a junior level. So it would probably help those guys out. But for mid-sized firms, I don't see them having the inclination or appetite to necessarily want to do that. Mid-sized firms will maybe have an internal recruitment team that will deal with their own adverts, and even that is limited in terms of response, because let's face it, who has time to actually search and apply for jobs these days? Some people will do it direct and not use agencies, others will use agencies directly. So I think recruitment's going to be around for some time, because again, the other thing you don't get is that human interaction.
Yeah.
And we've all seen boom and bust times in recruitment, and I think generally speaking the good guys are the ones that go through those high and low points. So I'd like to think with everything that we're doing in terms of personal brand and trust and integrity and transparency, that those relationships that we're building are going to be long lasting, and people trust us to advise accordingly.
Where do you think we are in that kind of boom and bust cycle? I mean, a lot of people that I talk to, times are really tough at the minute. Yeah. We've seen a lot of jobs, that used to be around that aren't around. Are you feeling that? How's how is the market in that respect for you guys?
So I think people will always need lawyers, unfortunately, or fortunately. I mean, obviously, if you need one and you've got a good one, then it's money well spent, right? So the industry's not going to go anywhere. If we take property as an example, our clients will only grow based on their ability to win new business, or their existing clients to provide new business. So if we take residential housing as an example, if we were to go back to the credit crunch, for example, a homeowner will go, oh shit, excuse my language, what's my house worth? Don't know, no idea. What does it mean for my mortgage? Am I going to have to put food on the table for the kids? Don't know. That's the worst I've probably seen it, apart from listening to my parents about the mid-80s recession or whatever. And
when interest rates were 15% or whatever.
But at the time interest rates were 5 or 6%. There's probably like a 6-month hiatus of people going, what's this all about? And then the wheels started moving again.
Yeah.
Look, world events at the moment are mad. With the war, with what's happening in the US elections, with UK elections, Brexit and all this. So that hold your breath period is a little longer. Yeah. I think confidence, generally speaking, with investors is probably on the conservative side, and obviously interest rates and things like that, waiting for it to come down. But law firms need lawyers to service the clients that they've got. There's always churn. So we've seen a lot of firms that have been probably more cautious at promoting people into more senior roles. So what happens when certain people get a certain level, thinking, well, I can't wait for another 2 or 3 years for my next promotion. I'll see what's out in the marketplace. Yeah. And they might get, rather than a sideways move, get that promotion by changing firms.
Yeah.
So there's always churn. There's always people leaving the industry, leaving London. So it is quieter than, let's say, 3 years ago, post-lockdown, when the wheels moved pretty quickly, when everyone realised we can get on with our lives.
Yeah.
But they're moving nonetheless. I think some customers of ours are probably prepared to take longer to hire, and they might be hiring at the top end of the spectrum of skills that they need, where in any fast-moving market, people going, well, we've got a shortage of skills, let's take somebody that we need to maybe invest a bit more time in, and actually we'll get more out of that person because they're learning on the job, rather than a lateral hire where somebody's just going sideways and just repeating the same for an extra little bit of salary or whatever.
Yeah.
So yes, it's slower. It's not quite as buoyant as the peak times, but I definitely wouldn't feel like we're at a trough in terms of what we're doing. There's still plenty out there,
That's
thankfully.
We like that, a little bit of positivity. So brilliant. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Doug.
No problems.
Really, very much enjoyed.
Good to get that all off my chest.
Yeah, there you go. And that neither of us fell asleep after our lunch as well. So
that's a bonus.
Yeah, good. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much.